So this is a hopefully helpful guide for Larry for editing in Reaper. We talked about you doing some editing at home, and I mentioned that this was a possibility. So I'd put together this guide video for a few other podcasters, a few other people in the Canoe podcasting program, and I figured I'd show one to you that was kind of what I did to some of your shows that would cover some of the basics of editing and mixing in this, so that you can take on some of that yourself. So without further ado, here we go. So you probably are used to Audition. You've got your play button up here. You've got your record button for any tracks that are record enabled. Record enabled. And I'm not sure if you're planning to record at home or if you're going to record at the station, but either way, you can record in this just the same way as you can in Audition. I've got these guest tracks here for any interviews, any people that you're speaking with. And then I've got the music tracks here for your music tracks or any like pre-produced stuff like the podcast things, the stingers. So yeah, I guess, you know what, we'll just get into it and I'll just kind of show you what the workflow's like. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click just anywhere in this kind of gray area. I just need to make sure that I'm clicked somewhere in here to make sure that the shortcut's going to work. I'm going to press M, and that's going to show me my Media Explorer. So if you're not a big shortcut user, you can also see, you can see which keys I'm pressing down here in the bottom right-hand corner. If you're not a big shortcut user, you can get this by going View and going to Media Explorer. And you'll also see the shortcuts are listed on the right-hand side. But Media Explorer is the one you want, because what this is going to let us do is, I can go, not downloads, into Canoe, into your show, and drag in an episode. So I'm going to pull this into the host track, and I'm going to drop it in there. This little window is going to pop up. This is just it generating this little waveform preview. It'll take a few seconds. It usually goes way faster than this, but because it's a 40-minute, hour-long show, it's quite a big file. So it takes a little bit of time to process. So I'm going to click again in this gray area. I'm going to press M again to hide that Media Explorer. Or again, you can go up to View, click on that, and I just like to move that out of the way so that I can have more room to work here. And just in case it's not clear, the Media Explorer is just, it's like the File Explorer on your computer. It's not connected to the internet or anything. This would be like, after you download the music or whatever, it would be like your, My Documents folder at the station computer. Okay. So now that we've got this in here, let's see what we want to do with it. So the first thing that happens is we've got the flute that plays. And I believe you are not playing the full thing. So we're going to shorten this way down here, and we're going to pull this over so that we can line it up a little better with the beginning. And I think this might be one of the station stingers, so we might actually want to cut this one out.
This is what...
And it is. So we want to make sure that we don't have any potentially, copyrighted material. We'll get rid of that. And there we go. We know who that is. And so we've got this flute. I'm going to put a little fade in on the beginning, and then I'm going to put a longer fade in at the end. Okay, so I'm going to undo what I just did and realize that there's a big concept that I didn't mention yet, which is the reason that I'm recommending this program is because it has a lot of built-in little shortcuts that other programs like Audacity don't do, that programs like Audition do. But sometimes they do them in a slightly different way. And I'm pretty sure Audition does this in exactly the same way, so I don't think this is anything new to you. Now that I mention it, but we're going to make sure that our mouse is on the top right-hand corner, because depending on where your mouse is located, you're going to get a different set of options. So if we wanted to move this, earlier or later in the show, we would want the white regular mouse cursor. And when we click down, we see there's a little black cross cursor that comes up with a little position end dialog next to it. And that means we've got the move tool, so we can move this around wherever we want. I'm going to undo that. And let's say we wanted just to make it shorter. We didn't want to move it earlier or later. We just want less of it. We're going to hold our mouse over either the left side or the right side, left or right, and you'll see this little sort of staple looking thing with 2 arrows over top of it. You're going to click on that, and then you can drag to either shorten it or lengthen it. And what you can do is you can lengthen it longer than the original, and it'll just loop it around again. So like if we wanted the flute to just continue, for 5 minutes, you can see there's these 2 little black arrows that show up at the top and the bottom. That indicates that a new loop is starting, or that's the beginning of the file happening over again. So I'm going to trim it in, and holding the mouse over the top corner, we get that fade tool. I'm going to fade it out. So I'm going to get a short little fade in, nice long fade out, and then we'll have this.
Welcome to Tales from the Big Canoe here at Canoe FM, your host.
And we can also pull this over too to have more of a crossfade between them. It's up to you how you want to have that transition happen.
Welcome to Tales from the Big Canoe here at Canoe FM, your host Larry O'Connor. I want to start this program like I do every Tales from the Big Canoe by acknowledging that we are on the territorial and treaty lands of the Algonquins of Golden Lake, as well the Mississaugas of Curve Lake. They're William Treaty signatories, just as the Canadian.
Okay, I'm just going to stop that there for a second, and I'm going to go over one of the probably most common things that you're going to be doing, which is zooming in and zooming out. So because you've got these, these little tools that show up, this hill with the arrows for the fade, the little staple with the arrows for the trim, and then, just the regular mouse arrow for the move tool, it's sometimes hard to get exactly the one you want when you're, kind of zoomed out like this. Like maybe I want to adjust the fade and I can't quite get it to show up. So the thing that you need to do is zoom in. So there's a few different ways. If you're a keyboard and mouse user, you can hold down Control on your keyboard and you'll see the little pencil tool pops up, and then use the scroll wheel on your mouse. And the scroll wheel on your mouse will always zoom in and out relative to where that green line is. So it's going to zoom in and out based on wherever you're clicked. So if I click over here, it's going to zoom into that point. If I click back here, it's going to zoom into there. So that's not the only way to zoom. There's a couple other ways. One of them is if you're not a keyboard mouse person, if you say have a laptop that you're using a trackpad, then you don't have a scroll wheel on it. You might want to use the letters R and T. I try to have a little mnemonic in my head for towards and reverse. So if you want to go towards something, you go T for going towards to zoom right in, and then R to reverse back out again. And let's see, I think there's another way. Yeah, you can also get these plus and minus icons at the bottom. That will zoom in and out. And you can go view, zoom, zoom in, zoom out. And there's also extensions, zoom preferences. So I don't need that. There's a ton of different ways that you can zoom. Figure out whichever one makes the most sense to you and go with that, because that is the solution to so many things. Because if you're way out here and you need to grab it and you can't get the grab tool, or you need the fade tool and you can't get it, you just need to click where you want to be, zoom in, and then you can get whichever part you need to. Same with making edits. So let's say we click in here. Okay, so this is a perfect example because this is one of those things that I unfortunately probably would have had to just cut straight out of your show. So let's look at an example of one of the edits that I would have done. So I'll find a spot right before the music starts.
Scott on Hudson Bay. So sit back. I hope you enjoy this show.
Okay, so we'll see if we can find the spot after the introduction before you introduce the musical guest.
Canadians as well. I hope you enjoyed this month's program. This month's program is kind of based around education. And when I talk about education, I'm talking about education of our Indigenous peoples. Now, this here includes a trip that I took to Sault Ste. Marie to discover family members that went to the residential school system at the Shinwak Residential School, as well as the Wawanosh, a girls' residential school.
So actually, before we go any further, one thing I'm noticing is this track, it's clipping into the red, so it looks like it's actually slightly too loud. So if you have a clip that is a little bit too loud to begin with, and this is probably because this is a finished radio show, that's already been to air, it's already been, polished up, whereas this is expecting just a raw voice track, straight out of your recorder or, from an interview. What we can do is we can just double click on it, and then you've got this volumes thing here, and that'll let us turn it down. So we can either do that or, let's say we apply that. You'll see it's a little smaller now. So we shouldn't have that issue with it clipping out anymore. Too late.
Cover family members that went to the residential school system at the Shinwak Residential School, as well as the Wawanosh, a girls' residential school in Sault Ste. Marie. As well, I'm going to have some great interviews surrounding the Shannon Kustachian, her movement, the work she did, and the recognition of all her work for the school in Attawapiskat on Hudson Bay. So sit back. I hope you enjoy this show around Indigenous education before, now, and into the future.
Okay, so we could just leave it with your whole into the future and then just kind of fade that out and cut to the next section. Or we can try and cut before that. Really that kind of stuff is up to you, as long as, unfortunately, we get the song out of there. If we have, a couple of seconds at the beginning of it fading out, I don't think that's going to really nail us. So let's just make a quick edit.
I hope you enjoy this show.
So I'm gonna leave. You know what? Let's make sure we get your whole, all of you talking in there.
Before, now, and into the future.
Okay, so I'm going to say that's where I want to make the cut. So I've got a keyboard shortcut set up for E that will slice and will separate those two things. So now that we've separated them, I'm going to fade this one out, and then I'm just going to trim this one back so that we don't hear it right away.
Attawapiskat on Hudson Bay. So sit back. I hope you enjoy this show around Indigenous education before, now, and into the future.
Okay, so that seems like it'll probably make a good transition. So we can zoom out, and now we're going to see if we can find where that song ends.
Album Heart of the People. I want to thank you, Leila Gill.
Okay, so it looks like that is where the song ends and where you start talking and introducing it. So I'm going to put in a cut right there. I'm going to then left click on this so that it's highlight. And you can either use backspace, you can use X. There's a number of ways to get rid of something, but that is one of them. And then we're going to close this gap up by clicking and dragging this second half close to that first one. So I don't know exactly where I want to put it yet, but I know roughly where I want my transition to be. So I click and I zoom in again.
Before, now, and into the future. I want to thank you, Leila Gildy, for that song called Cut My Hair from the album Heart of the People, which was released in the fall of 2014. Leila is a Dene from the Northwest Territories, and for that album she was nominated for a Juno Award and is a two-time Juno Award winner herself. I thought Cut My Hair certainly was a fitting song maybe to start the show off with, because as we go to the Shinwak School interviews that I've had recently in Sault Ste. Marie, that was one of the first things they probably did with all the young.
Well, this is a tough one, because you mentioned the song in relation to the thing that you're about to do the interview about. So this will be a bit of a, maybe one of those edits that's not that easy. But again, this is just to show you how the editing process works, not necessarily to say where an edit should be placed, because that is obviously up to you. So I know that I'm not going to use a lot of that stuff because we cut the song out. So I'm just going to trim to get rid of a lot of that, and I'll figure out where exactly I want to start you at.
Thought Cut My Hair certainly was a fitting song maybe to start the show off with, because as we go to the Shin...
We could try just going with As We Go.
Because as we go to the Shinwalk...
Let's see what we can do here.
Because as we go to the... As we go to the Shinwalk School interviews that I've had recently in Sault Ste. Marie, that was one of the first things they probably did with all the young children coming in there. They started cutting the boys' hair when they are...
So it's not a perfect transition, but I think it'll work well enough. So I click and I drag it over, and you probably saw a little preview already of what's going to happen next. This is another one of those nice little features. I can't remember if Audition does this or not, but it will automatically connect and automatically crossfade these. So I'm going to have a bit of an issue because I wanted that fade out to be longer, but we can just do this.
Indigenous education before, now, and into the future. Show off with because...
Can't make it that long though.
Before, now, and into the future. Show off with because as we go to...
Okay.
Before, now, and into the future. With because as we go to the Shinwalk...
Okay, so obviously that edit is not going to work exactly, so here's what we can do instead. I'm going to undo to get back to where I had that nice little fade out, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag this to the track underneath because it's exactly the same track, and this way I can just have you start right kind of where you're fading out. So I'll put a tiny little fade in at the beginning, and let's listen to see how that turns out.
Education before, now, and into the future. As we go to the Shinwalk...
So I could probably even put that a little bit later and it would work a little better. Let's take a listen again.
Education before, now, and into the future. As we go to the Shinwalk School interviews that I've had recently in Sault Ste. Marie, that was one of the first things they probably did with all the young children coming in there. They started cutting the boys' hair when they arrived, which of course, according to culture, really isn't done until they come of age, and this certainly wasn't the right time nor place in their life that should have been happening. So thank you, Leela Dildley. Now let's hear from my trip to the Shinwalk School. Hello, my name is Larry O'Connor, and I have...
Okay, and now we'll zoom forward. Let's see if we can do one more edit on one of these songs. Looks like this is one here. Let's take a listen. Click somewhere close to where we want to be. So again, this is kind of the most of the game in audio editing, whether it's this program or whether it's Audition. Zooming way out to figure where out, zooming way out to figure out where you are, and then zooming in to do all the detail work. So we're gonna, it looks like here we've got some talking and here we've got some music. So let's take a listen and hear if I'm right.
Go offline here because I want to ask some questions about my family here. So thank you very much, Krista. Is again your website here?
Yeah, so it's archives.algomau.ca.
And a phone number for the center?
It's 705-949-2301, extension 4623.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could potentially get some of that sort of clothing rustle out of there too.
Sure, appreciate that.
Yeah.
So after she says, yeah, so I'm going to click right in here, going to hit E to make my separation. And then this is music, I believe, so I'll just take a quick spin through to hear where the music ends.
My grandma, Canoe FM.
The Algoma University and...
I went a little too far.
Voice of the Haliburton Highlands.
This is ground control to Major Tom.
Welcome back to Tales from the Big Canoe, your host, Larry O'Connor. Now the interview...
Okay, so I'm going to start it on now, because obviously the David Bowie stuff has got to go, same as the other music. Again, it's perfect on the air, but unfortunately, just the way podcast licensing goes, we have to cut it out. So there we go. We cut that one out, and we can pull this in and see if we can do, a little transition. If we don't get a nice little transition happening, then we can always pull it up to the next track. So I'm just going to click and drag to move it over, just so it's over top, and you'll see, maybe we can zoom in closer to see, it's automatically creating this fade for us. So if we pull it off, it's gone. If we put it on there, it's back. And then we take a listen.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now, the interview you heard just prior to that commercial break was with the curator of the Shinwalk resident. Just prior to that commercial break was with...
So again, with the podcast, we're not going to have that commercial break in there, so I can probably just cut that out, I think. So we can do E to cut on one side, E to cut on the other, and then backspace to delete. Click and drag this over, and then take a listen.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now, the interview you heard was with the curator of the Shinwalk Residential School in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And of course, the Shinwalk School is connected to the Algoma University. And I did have an opportunity to go and look up some
So that is the basics of the cutting and removing. So whether that's, an interview, you want to cut out some background noise, or you want to cut out, a question that you said, if somebody coughs, if somebody clears their throat in the middle of an answer, maybe you want to just get rid of that. That's a perfect way to do that. Let's take a look at what this little sound is. We'll just cut this out to see if we can.
Swears.
Okay, so I'm not sure what it is, but we'll see. We can place our green line where we want to make the first cut. Press E, it'll make that cut. Click afterwards. Press E, it'll make another cut. And then backspace will get rid of that stuff in between. And then you can click and drag until you get those little red lines showing up, meaning you've got a crossfade. And sometimes the crossfades are really small, but they're still there. So if you're not sure, you can take a listen.
And
that sounds like a good crossfade to me. Let's take a listen to one without.
So how many?
It wasn't really super noticeable, but you should still try and do crossfades when you can. Okay, so that is... Oops. That is the majority of editing. We'll go over a couple more things quickly. We'll again zoom back in. So I really like using control and scroll wheel on the mouse. I find that's what I'm used to. But again, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can zoom in with these buttons down here, or with R and T on the keyboard to go towards. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this so it's selected. I'm going to do Control C to copy. No, I'm just going to do C to copy. You can also right click on something and go copy if you want. And then I'm going to go out, click where I want this to go at the end of the show, and then I'll do V to paste. Or again, if you know where you want it to go, you can right click and go paste. So I don't want that there, so I'm going to undo that. And again, you can get to undo up here. Oops, edit, undo, Control Z. And you can see Control Z, that's the one that I'm doing with the keyboard. So we didn't really get that exactly where we wanted it to go, but let's say we try and get it a little closer. So let's say we do this here, and then we'll have the flute to fade out. So it looks like there's probably music here already, but just for the sake of demonstrating. Maybe I'll pull that so that they fade out at the same time. So again, you may not want those two tracks to play over top of one another, but I will leave that entirely up to you, and we'll show you the last sort of couple of things here. So, I don't know how I did it exactly, but it looks like I left a little gap in here. But let's see. If we grab this, then we can see we've got this section, but then there's another section ahead of it, a tiny little cut there. But then we have to get rid of this gap because we can't have, 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds of just silence in the middle of your show. So if you grab this one, we're not getting that other one underneath it. If we grab this one, then it doesn't grab the one behind it. And I have a feeling this is one that we've already made this transition. We've already done this edit. So if we want to keep these two together and move them together, so far we've been doing a lot of left clicking and, left click and drag to select a chunk of time. What we want to do with this is we want to right click and drag, and that will give us our tool that will let us select clips. So we're going to right click and drag over these two clips. That gets both of them selected. And let's say, we dragged all three by mistake and we didn't want that one. You can right click and drag over an empty area and that'll deselect everything. So we want to right click and drag over top of these two, and then that'll let us move them both together. We can cinch up that little gap. zoom way out, click on the end, see how that transition is. So we can click retime that a little bit. And again, we're just saying hypothetically this is what we want. Now we are going to go for a little measurement. So podcasts want you to be at a certain loudness level. And to check that, there's this special loudness meter. And you get that by clicking on the FX button. And it looks like we're actually sitting in a good spot. So this light blue number is the most important one. You want it to be between minus 16, that's the loudest it can go, and minus 19, that's the quietest it can go. So it's in this sort of like little sweet spot right here where it'll just be, you know, nice listening. It'll sound roughly the same as all the other podcasts out there. So I'm going to do a quick measurement. And the way that this meter works is it takes an average reading of the entire show. So if your show's an hour long, it's going to take an hour-long measurement. I'm going to click at the beginning, and I'm going to play it for a few seconds. I'm going to click in the middle, play it for a few seconds, and I'm going to click at the end and play it for a few seconds, and then we'll make adjustments if we need to.
They held the first Shingwaka reunion on this site, and they invited former students and people connected to the residential school to come.
So minus 15.9, it's a little, like it's 0.1 too loud. We want it to be minus 16 at the loudest. So we might need to turn it down, but we're not going to make any adjustments yet. We're going to take a little listen in the middle.
University and an Aboriginal institute basically sharing the same site. We're neighbors.
Right.
SKG actually delivers our degree program in both the language and...
So that's between, you know, way too quiet and just a tiny bit too quiet. So we got one that's a tiny bit too loud. We got one that's a tiny bit too quiet. So far, that seems, you know, in my head at least, to be averaging out to a good volume. We'll take a listen at the end and we'll get our third check.
The site, and then we asked Shannon if it was okay if we moved the memorial site to New Lisgard, and then when we actually revealed the...
Okay, so that one is actually quite a bit too loud. So I'm going to say, because we got one that's way too loud at the end, a tiny bit too loud at the beginning, and, you know, maybe a tiny bit too quiet in the middle, we probably still need to turn it down. So it's saying it's at roughly minus 14 overall. So let's say we'll take this circle here is our volume knob. We're going to click it, and when you click it and hold it down, you'll see that volume come up. We're going to get minus 3, let's say. And then because we pulled these and we separated them onto 2 tracks, we're going to get the same up here. So minus, what did I say down here? 3.43, 3.43, boom. Doesn't have to be bang on, but as long as you get it close. Then we'll take a couple quick measurements again.
A place that survivors and their family members could come to learn more information about either their...
That looks okay.
Working on that. So there's a lot of not only just good academic programs and supports, but a lot of cultural, a lot of, academic.
So again, a tiny bit on the quiet side, but overall looks pretty good.
Or what could I do to pay tribute to all of her...
And you know what? That at the end looks really good. So I'm going to hit return, hit enter on my keyboard to get that green line to snap back to the very top. And now I'm going to go File, Render. And this will actually export the show. So this will be Larry's test show. And we want to make sure this is an MP3, so we go MP3 here. And now once we click render, you'll get a little window pop up that shows you how far it's gone through the rendering process, but you'll also be able to watch this number for the whole time. So depending on what this number says at the end, we may have to do a little bit of re-exporting because like you saw, there were parts that were a little bit too loud, parts that were a little bit too quiet. So I think we evened it out enough, but this will be the thing that tells us. So I'm going to click render, and you can see it's working its way through. It's going faster than real time, and we can see this number is sitting right now perfectly in the middle. So it's in between, where are we at, minus 16 up here and minus 19. It's right in our Goldilocks zone. So it is getting a hair into, slightly quiet territory. But then again, it's bouncing back up. So another thing to bear in mind about the loudness meter is because it's averaging, the further along you go, the less each of those numbers is going to mean, because you've already established such a baseline already. So we've had a bunch going into the 15s, but because we had a bunch that was, at minus 20 something, then overall, we're still sitting in our good zone. So yeah, again, we've got stuff that goes high and low and high and low, but it looks like overall we're in a good spot. And again, this is going to bounce all over the place. All these numbers down here are telling you different things. This one in the blue, this is the only one that we're really concerned about. We need it to be no louder than minus 16, and we want it to be no quieter than minus 19. Okay, looks like it's just finishing up, and minus 17.7, that is in the Goldilocks zone. You can click Show in Explorer. That'll show you where your file's created, and you can upload this file straight to Zencastr. Okay, so I hope between this video and the stuff in the manual that you are up and running in Reaper, but shoot me an email if you have any trouble, and hopefully we can get you off and running. Thanks, Larry.